Hello, welcome back to my channel. I thought since a few days ago I did a video on first lines, I would do a little companion one on last lines. Now, obviously with last lines, it's a different motivation really, because you're not trying to hook someone in with a last line. Presumably they've already read the book or the short story. What you're trying to do instead, I suppose, is get them to read another thing, get them to be satisfied with what they've read so that they either read another book of yours or continue on to another story. And just generally so that you leave them feeling in some way satisfied with what they've read, not disappointed, confused, baffled, annoyed, etc., etc. You want to tie things up in a way. I mean, not necessarily you want to tie everything up, but you want to certainly have a meaningful ending, an ending that fits the kind of story you've written. So I'm going to look at short stories this time rather than novels, because I think the ending of a short story is just that little bit more important in a sense, because if you read the first story in a collection and the ending is a disappointment or confusing, you may just sort of set it aside and not read on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give 5 examples from classic short story writers of different eras, and then I'm going to have a look at just 3 of my own and see whether the lessons I've learned from the masters I've managed to somehow absorb in my own writing. Because I haven't really conscientiously analysed my endings and why I end things the way I do. It's just really a sort of instinctive thing. I don't know whether it's dangerous to analyse it too much. So I'm just going to have a look at these and figure out why I think they work, and then do the same with my own and hopefully learn some valuable lessons along the way. So let's see. So the first thing I'm going to look at is a story by Ted Chiang. Now Ted wrote the short story called The Story of Our Lives, which was adapted into Arrival, the science fiction movie. But I'm actually going to look at another story, primarily because I haven't yet got around to reading The Story of Our Lives. And the only story I've read in this book is the first one, Towers of Babylon. But I will read further because I really liked the story. I thought it was great. So Towers of Babylon, Tower of Babylon, as you may expect, is a kind of fairly literal telling of what that imagined story would be if it was a genuine, real thing. He's literally telling you what it would be like to work on the Towers of Babylon, on the Tower of Babylon. So it's quite an amazing thing. It's got a kind of slightly archaic quality to it, obviously, because he's having to use terminology and sort of engineering terms and things that would have been around in biblical times. But anyway, after this incredible, there's a danger there may be 1 or 2 spoilers in this. Sorry, there's nothing much I can do about that. Watch another video if you don't want to find out how things end. But I'm really going to just talk about the last line, or the last couple of lines. So I'm not really going to explain too much how those things feed into the narrative. So I think it should be fine. Anyway, the last line of Tower of Babylon is, he would tell them about the shape of the world. And the last paragraph is, Hilalum rose to his feet, his legs unsteady from awe, and sought out the caravan drivers. He would go back to Babylon. Perhaps he would see Lugatum again. He would send word to those on the tower. He would tell them about the shape of the world. And really, it sort of rounds off an adventure. And one thing I realised that some short stories do is express an insight. So the main character in the story has gained an insight from his experience in the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babylon, in other words. So yeah, I mean, it's just a great line. He would tell them about the shape of the world. It's got a sort of mythic quality to it. It ends very powerfully. If you end on the phrase "the shape of the world," that's a great curtain closing line. And it's unexpected because, well, when you're reading the story, you don't see the ending coming. You don't see it going this particular direction, really. Especially when you know the biblical story that of the Tower of Babel, where God got angry, struck it down, and made it so that everyone on Earth spoke different languages, so they wouldn't be able to organise and communicate and work on a project like this again. Hasn't worked, really. We're still sending people to space. Anyway, yeah, so it's an unexpected ending, but it's a very sort of mythic and powerful ending. So I think that works especially well to end that sort of tale. By contrast, another master of the short story, Raymond Carver, and this is from the title story Cathedral. Now, Cathedral is basically a story narrated by a fairly unlikable man who he's an ordinary bloke. He doesn't like his job very much. We don't learn much about him. We learn that he doesn't like his job. We learn that his wife has been married before, and during her first marriage, when things were going wrong, she befriended the husband of a friend of hers who's blind. I think congenitally blind. He's always been blind. And they've been corresponding through the medium of recording tapes and sending them to each other, which is something people used to do in the olden days. And in this story, this fairly unlikable narrator talks about the fact this blind man's going to come and visit, and he's not that happy about it. He's confused, and he doesn't know how to deal with a blind man. He's kind of slightly prejudiced, but more, I think it's more that he just is frightened. He's frightened of how to deal with this situation, and possibly there's an edge of insecurity about his relationship, about his wife perhaps tiring of him or finding more in common with this blind man. There's a bit of envy or jealousy there. But there is a kind of moment of contact in it. He finds himself in a position where he has to describe a cathedral, the concept of a cathedral, to this blind man, because it suddenly occurs to him, admittedly when he's stoned and they've been sharing a joint, that this blind man might not really have any conception of what a cathedral is. So he tries and semi-succeeds and semi-fails to describe a cathedral. And then at the end of the book, it kind of shows that he's learned something, at least, or he has like a little bit more empathy. He's got his eyes closed. And I'll read the last couple of lines. It says, "But I had my eyes closed. I thought I'd keep them that way for a little longer. I thought it was something I ought to do." "Well," he said, "are you looking?" My eyes were still closed. I was in my house, I knew that, but I didn't feel like I was inside anything. "It's really something," I said. So what he's doing there, they've been through this exercise of the blind man thought of an innovative way to give him the experience of being blind whilst at the same time using his mind's eye to picture a cathedral and then transmit that information to the blind man. It's quite a strange scene. They're actually both, obviously the man with vision, the narrator, has got his eyes closed and he's trying to draw a cathedral from memory, and the blind man is holding his hand and sort of visualizing from the movements what the shapes would be like. So it's quite in a short film version, it would be quite an amazing scene. You'd probably end up with a complete squiggle, but it would be his mind's eye memory of what a cathedral is. And the fact that he's closing his eyes, I think he's still picturing the cathedral in his mind, and perhaps he's imagining what it must be like not to have that image in your mind. Anyway, there's a sort of hint of empathy at the end, but Carver's very subtle. He doesn't, he's not going to come out with a revelatory moment. He doesn't really do these big revelatory moments. Life goes on is sort of the summary of Carver. Anyway, so that's, I have to say I'm slightly sorry I haven't got any collections by female authors. I will try and amend that. I have 5 collections, all by male authors at the moment. This one's William Trevor, another relatively, I think he died fairly recently. The story, The Piano Teacher's Pupil, has a very nice ending. This is another interesting story where you have a slightly jaded, disappointed spinster piano teacher who's had a great love, but the love let her down because he was married and he never left his wife and he abandoned her. And her father, she suspects, was trying to sort of curry favour with her. He was a chocolatier and he's always bringing home these amazing treats, and she sort of thought he was trying to get her to not leave, move out of the house. And I think she still lives in the family house, although he's long passed away. But she has this pupil come who's this young kid who she thinks is a prodigy, absolutely amazing player. But she also discovers he's a kleptomaniac. Well, he steals things. He seems to steal things, and she's trying to figure out why he would be doing this, and she doesn't mention it to him. And this is how the story concludes. There was a balance struck. It was enough. And actually, I'll go back a little bit. And looking at him, Miss Nightingale realised what she had not before, that mystery was a marvel in itself. She had no rights in this. She had sought too much in trying to understand how human frailty connected with love, or with the beauty that the gifted brought. There was a balance struck. It was enough. So she sort of just accepts that this boy will come, play amazing music, and occasionally steal something. So it's got a weird sort of it's a bittersweet. I like bittersweet stories, and this has definitely got some of that. So I think it's very nicely poignant and very simple and short. There was a balance struck. It was enough. And in fact, there's a colon in the middle of that sentence. So it's almost like a little seesaw. One clause, colon, second clause, balance. Now we're going to jump back into the 19th century. Are we in the 19th century? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes. Now, obviously it's slightly different with these because they are a series of stories featuring the same characters. And they're written for a serial publication, Strand magazine. So they have to end, but they have to also suggest a continuation. And so I'm just going to read the ending of this one story, The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is actually was published almost as a novel. It's got 9 separate chapters. So I think it's got 10, many chapters, 14 chapters. I think it was published in possibly over the course of several months. I'd have to do some research, but so readers have been following this story, and then finally they get to this after I don't know how much you know about the Hound of the Baskervilles. I can't quite remember exactly. I haven't reread the story, but obviously Sherlock Holmes solves the mystery. And then it ends like this. And now, my dear Watson, we have had some weeks of severe work, and for one evening I think we may turn our thoughts into more pleasant channels. I have a box for Les Huguenots. Have you heard the De Resque? Might I trouble you to be ready in half an hour, and we can stop at Marcini's for a little dinner along the way? So it's very domestic. It's very domestic. It's very much bringing the reader back to a comfortable place at the end of quite a scary, almost supernatural story, and comforting you that things will continue. Yeah, there's a volume before this called The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes published, and at the end of that, Conan Doyle tried to kill him off, but the public objected strongly. To cut a long story short, Conan Doyle had to bring Sherlock Holmes back, and he brought him back in style. And so the ending's partly about reassuring the reader that we're back to business as usual. And it's quite a nice little domestic image, the two of them going out for dinner and then going to see, I think it's probably an operetta or something, Le Huguenot. So yeah, you sort of, it's almost like the last scene in a TV show. It's quite modern in a way. You know, you have the characters, you know, like one of those old school Agatha Christie or, you know, Poirot or something. It's a bit, you know, you can see where that model came from Conan Doyle, having the characters return to their starting point at the end, pleased with themselves and just going out to dinner. It's a very low-key ending. In contrast, Guy de Maupassant, also from the 19th century, at the end of his terrifying story of psychological torment and supernatural shenanigans, the entity, otherwise known as the Orlah, and this is how this ends. No, no, there is no doubt, it isn't dead, and so, I will have to kill myself. It's extraordinary. It's and the whole thing is narrated by somebody who's going through this terrifying psychological torment, and he's going mad. This is madness, absolute madness, and it ends actually with ellipsis. It's hard to know whether it is a sentence or not, because there's just ellipsis all the way through it. There's no 3 dots, no 3 dots. There is no doubt, 3 dots. It isn't dead, 3 dots. And so I will have to kill myself, 3 more dots. So why 3 dots at the end? Why not just end on, I'll have to kill myself. I think possibly just to leave the door open that this may not happen. This might not be the end of the story. But this is definitely the end of his sanity. So quite a powerful ending. Required a bit of better acting than I was capable of there. So anyway, that's 5 very different contrasting endings. You have low-key endings, you have uber dramatic endings, you have endings where somebody learns something, you have sort of end of an adventure endings, and you have strangely poignant endings. Basically, you just need to give the audience a little capper, a little present at the end, a little sign off, something, ideally a nicely composed final line, and probably not too long. So let's see if I've managed to achieve this with some stories from Running the Orient. And now you can see, I believe you can see all of these stories on my channel. So if you want to, I won't spoil the story for you, I'll just read the last lines and then talk about what I was trying to achieve with them, because I don't think there are really any spoilers in these last lines. So from the story Duet, the last line is, Stella sang of tragic loss and regret, and her voice bore testimony to her loss and the world's. So what I was going for there was just a sense of a character paying tribute to another character. That's all I'm going to say. But it links into the theme of, because it's set during the first COVID lockdown, when this character is able to connect with a neighbour through singing. So she's now trying to connect again with the world, but she doesn't have that partner to do a duet with anymore. So I wanted to end with something poignant. And again, I've done a similar thing to Mr. Chiang, in that I've ended with and the world's, and he's ended with shape of the world. World is a very powerful line, very powerful word to end on. It's generally quite a good idea to end on something concrete and dramatic or beautiful. Although you can have a throwaway ending. You can have an ending that's just, as I walked away, light rain began to fall. And you can end with something that conjures up an image of, like the end of a movie where the camera always seems to crane up into some trees. Sometimes you can have that kind of ending where we're just pulling away from the story. The second example from my work I'm going to give you is from a story called The Purple Heart, which is also published. You can find it on the channel. And it ends this way. I'm Will Godley, he began, and I have made many mistakes. So actually this is an ending that's a beginning. This is an ending that is the beginning of a conversation that's been long coming. And so it does satisfy the audience because it shows that he's learned something, it shows that he's self-aware, he's introducing himself to a character, and possibly his life's going to take a new direction. So it should be satisfying, hopefully. And finally, from the story called Wheatfield with Crows, which is about Vincent van Gogh, this is how I chose to end it. There was always the lovely light just before sunset, the wheat field before the scythes come, the cackling of crows, and the rich red earth under my boots. So this ends happily. This does not end with Vincent shooting himself. This ends with Vincent doing what he loves, which is to be in the field with the light low over the corn and watching the crows and painting everything. And it actually links back to the beginning of the story, and it partly describes what you see in the painting that the story is about. So that's what I was going for there. I was going for a very visual ending, and it's got a rhythm to it as well. I like the rhythm of the lovely light before sunset, the wheat field before the scythes come, the cackling of crows, and the rich red earth under my boots. Not really a rhythm so much as 4 concrete images that all combine to create a picture. Yeah, and it works on the different senses as well. So I don't even think about these things. I just know that this story has to end with something powerful and beautiful, so that we can leave Vincent alone and go back about our lives. So anyway, that's 4 stories from 3 endings from Stories in Running Coyote, which is available from all good Amazon now. It's not in bookshops, sadly. I haven't arranged bookshop distribution. Might be able to do that at some point, but at the moment it's Amazon only, I'm afraid. But yeah, I hope this is useful. Hope this provided a little bit of insight. If I sort of systematize my thoughts on endings, I might do another longer piece once I've had time to sort of cogitate and put it together. But I just thought it'd be fun to look at some endings and analyse them, just to make this a companion to the earlier piece. Anyway, that's me for today. Thanks for spending time with me. Subscribe if you haven't already. Maybe leave a comment and like this video, and I will see you again very soon. Goodbye.